Dream. I'd like to thank you again for joining this afternoon's webinar focused on Phase 2 of the WFSNCC Financial Products and Prototypes work. Very briefly, I'm going to go over some of the instructions for using GoToWebinar. You should see the control panel pictured on your screen right now. If you don't, it's because it has been minimized, and you can pull it back up by going to the Grab tab, which hides and shows the control panel. There's also an attendee list where you can see all of the participants on the call. If you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the control panel, and I can unmute your line, and you can ask a question. Another way to participate is through the questions pane. You can type your question in the question pane, and I can read it to the group or respond privately. All of the panes can be expanded or minimized by clicking on the plus or minus button that are at the top left of each pane. In the past, we've had some audio trouble. If for some reason you're having difficulty being heard or hearing the panelists, you will want to make sure that you're not muted on your personal phone. We will do the same as panelists as well to not talk with our lines muted. And if you've entered the audio pin provided to you at the beginning of the call, you should be able to, we should be able to unmute your line and ask a question if you choose to ask a question over the phone versus submitting through the questions pane. If that doesn't work, you can hang up and call back in and be sure to enter the audio pin. So I would ask just briefly or during the beginning of the webinar to please submit in the question pane the college where you're from, just so we can get a sense going through who all is on the call beyond who we see in the attendee list. So I would just like to briefly introduce the webinar panelists today. We're joined by Susan Guertz, who is a WFSNCC consultant who is helping to lead with Phase 2 of the WFSNCC Financial Products work. Tanya Latta from Center for Financial Services Innovation, who CFSI has worked with ATD during Phase 1 of the initiative to provide technical assistance to the participating colleges in that group. We're pleased to have her join us in the second phase. Lauren Lundbach from Community Financial Resources also participated in the first phase of the financial products work, and we're also very pleased to have her join us in Phase 2 and expanding technical assistance to colleges that are interested in doing a deeper dive in Pillar 3, as you'll hear more about in just a moment. Wendy De La Rosa from Irrational Labs, again another consultant working with Achieving the Dream on the WFSNCC work, particularly as it regards to kind of the financial behavior as it relates to financial products and prototypes being implemented by WFSNCC colleges, and myself, Julian Haynes, with Achieving the Dream. So this is the webinar that's going to take a brief look back at some of what we learned in the first phase of the financial products work, and then begin thinking about what the critical next steps are in advancing this work and the ways in which we intend to do that. As you are all very well aware, the WFSN strategy involves the intentional integration and sequencing of 3 distinct but related priorities. These are 3 pillars that have no doubt been seared into your mind, given all the hard work you've been doing on your WFSNCC strategies. The financial products and prototypes work that we're moving to advance in the second phase, moving into year 2, just as in year 1, is going to be specifically focused on pillar number 3. That is the financial services and asset building pillar. And we know that this is one pillar that many of the colleges in the consortia likely, I believe in our review, had the least amount of experience in kind of fully implementing or embedding into existing student supports and service structures at their campuses. So all the more reason for us to take a dedicated look in supporting colleges with this work through TA and some additional funding to expand this third pillar. So just a brief note about kind of some of the potential and real value add of expanding this pillar is that it has a great potential to address some of the financial challenges students face while also preparing students for financial stability in their post-college lives. It combines low and high touch strategies that can be scaled, particularly when paired with financial products and services, financial literacy, education, and/or coaching. So these are all unique complements to the pillars 1 and 2, the work and income supports, as well as the education and employment pillars that can speak to students' ability to save money, to be more aware of the resources that they have and how they allocate those resources to support their education and transition through post-secondary education. Very briefly, as many of you on the call participated in a similar webinar last year, the process that ATD and the partners, including the panelists on the call today, pursued to get to where we are now, kind of going into phase 2, begins with a webinar. Began with identifying and learning from the colleges some of the unique challenges that community college students face, particularly with regard to the financial asset development pillar. We conducted a webinar with community colleges. We conducted a survey to learn more about some of these unique challenges faced by students as it relates to these to the third pillar, and we conducted in-depth interviews with 8 community colleges, and ultimately identified 6 prototypes to be used or offered to interested colleges to do a kind of a deeper dive in the work of their that aligns with their third pillar. So that's just kind of very briefly where we kind of the process that we underwent to identify realistically how to best align the right prototype, the right product, the right internal process of implementing these prototypes and products based on college need and student need within the WFSNCC consortia. And so now we're excited, very excited to kind of advance this work and learn more from the colleges as they embark on this second phase of work. The phase 1 prototype designs, as you can see in this slide, focused on the following: the modifying distribution of financial aid, renaming financial aid quote-unquote refunds, providing emergency grants or loans with loans as a vehicle for future cushion, automatic allocation to savings, credit building tools, improving financial literacy efforts. And as you can see in kind of the second column, the inherent challenges, as well as to what extent they were they're in process or were kind of effectively implemented during the first phase with the colleges that you can see up on this slide who participated in the first phase of the work. These are all things, if you can understand why perspective of someone from like Wendy from Irrational Labs, where we can learn more about not just kind of the nuts and bolts challenges of implementing this work with regard to getting staff buy-in and culture change, but also kind of the student behaviors that are needed to think about uptake of certain new products and services or ways of doing business. I'm going to pass it to Susan Gewirtz to briefly talk about the lessons that will inform phase 2.
Thanks, Julian. We got a lot of important lessons from the first phase of the prototyping work that are informing this next round, and we're really appreciative of those colleges which kind of took the step with us into this a little bit of unknown territory. And I think the lessons really are helping us think about this next phase. Some of the things are, we heard about the importance of faculty as critical touch points for students, and that they must be intentionally engaged, and that they're going to need to have a role in sort of scaling this work up. We came away from the first round really believing that these types of strategies are possible and scalable. At the same time, we need to recognize the challenges related to execution, the requirements of staff time, and issues of coordination among departments. Next slide. Based upon phase 1, we also learned about areas where we need to tighten and strengthen in phase 2. In this next phase, we're going to help colleges frame more focused tests and define more clearly what needs to be measured. I think with more tightly designed prototypes, We'll also be able to strengthen the evaluation component of this work. And the evaluations really is going to be what's going to help us give guidance about what works and doesn't work as we talk about this and as we communicate to other colleges. We'll also more clearly define our consultant role to help colleges with such things as project management. We'll work with colleges to ensure that there's clear alignment with this work and the financial asset building strand that you've articulated within your implementation plans. Finally, each phase 2 prototype will need to articulate sort of how this intervention can contribute to scalable financial behavior change within the college. I think that was, thinking about scale from the beginning within these prototypes was a really important lesson from phase 1. Next slide. We also recognize that the WFSN colleges already have a lot on your plates. While we want your participation because we believe that this kind of work can make a difference for large numbers of students, we also want to recognize that this does require sort of extra effort. So a few things for you to consider before you decide to go forward, or how you'll go forward. You'll need staff who can commit to implementation demands, to engage students, and to make a commitment to data collection and evaluation. It's really also really important to have an institutional champion and interdepartmental support. So again, these are some of the things to think about as you listen to the rest of the presentation and as you consider whether you want to take a next step with this work. So now I will turn it over to Tanya.
Thanks, Susan. So Susan just mentioned that this phase was going to include a little bit more emphasis and detail around the measurement. So here you see a slide that walks us through kind of those metrics we're interested in tracking. And as administrators of this project, we're interested in both programmatic and individual metrics. We want to understand the resources being used and the resources required to undertake this work and implement it, what milestones are significant and meaningful. Maybe we have them right under assumptions, maybe we don't, but we want that tracked and better understood. And then kind of the ultimate impact on a college's greater operational success. So you'll see in the programmatic metrics column, we're looking at things like the amount of marketing and subsequent recruitment. What works, what doesn't? What is the attendance, participation, and most importantly, the completion of some of these interventions? Again, speaking to the milestones specific to the prototype, what things have significance along the progression of a college's journey of implementation, and the greater student retention and persistence to the college at large. What is the kind of impact, again, operationally for the community college? So we want to understand these metrics in conjunction with student financial success. Ultimately, the better we understand the impact of resource allocation and student financial success, the better we can kind of steward and direct the limited resources that we know you all deal with, having highest impact on student financial health. So the student metrics, these should look fairly familiar to you. No big surprises here, and I think we'll get a little bit more details with each of you individually as colleges, depending on the prototype that you select, and kind of go from there. But this is the general sense of student metrics that we're interested in here. Savings and credit scores, confidence in one's financial well-being and health, spending debt limits, levels, emergency funds, and retention. Next slide. So randomized controlled testing. This is a new element to phase 2 of the work, and it's open to both new schools as well as those who want to continue and expand the work that they've been doing. Rational Labs will talk further about the kind of exact specifications and requirements we'll be expecting, but as this is a new and very important, very critical feature of this phase of work, we wanted to highlight it separately. Randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, it's a type of experimental methodology where folks being studied are randomly allocated to one of one or another of different treatments, and we're really trying to test the efficacy or effectiveness of an intervention. So Susan mentioned the evaluation this time will be a little bit more rigorous, and this is one way in which that will be true. So we really want to ensure that our pilots and all of our testings are effective and impactful, and so we've chosen this particular specific intentional kind of tangible type of testing. Again, we're going to go through much more detail here, but we did want to call it out because it's a new element to this phase. Next slide. So here we discuss the different categories of participation and technical assistance in this round. It'll look a little bit different from round one because this is kind of continuation of work that's already been going on. So the first option is for existing prototype colleges to just continue and expand and improve, hopefully, right, their existing approach. And that cohort will have most likely the same technical assistance consultants working with them to move their projects along. We have an option this go round for existing colleges to commit to RCT. So again, I just mentioned that as a new element, and shortly we'll be hearing from Irrational Labs about it. But it's really a commitment to deeper evaluation of the current intervention. And there is, besides the learning opportunities with the cohort and the consultancy, there are grant and other technical assistance opportunities here. The final third option is for existing or new colleges to select a new prototype. So for existing colleges, they will switch to a new prototype, or a new college will, of course, it'll be their first prototype. I'm about to discuss what that priority set is, but this is an option for both new and existing colleges. And again, we are emphasizing this potential for RCT evaluation. And in terms of opportunities, it includes grants and technical assistance. We have set up some minimum requirements for phase 2 participation that are listed here on this slide. So we want a pre and post survey of all students in the intervention. And that's been finalized, and we'll make sure you all get a copy of that, as well as just kind of repeating what Susan mentioned a few minutes ago, articulation of a theory of how the work will contribute to improve financial behaviors at scale. So we really want to go into this phase 2 with very intentional and directed focus of work. And finally, next slide, the prototype designs. You'll see the 6 original pilot prototypes here, as you saw earlier. What we've highlighted is the priority prototypes that I mentioned in the previous slide that we're looking for in phase 2. Priority has been identified as prototypes that were not actively pursued in phase 1. So you'll see prototype 1, modifying distribution of financial aid. That was implemented in phase 2, but we're looking for it again in phase 1, we're looking for it again in phase 2. Also, an automatic allocation to savings. So really trying to avoid this hole of lacking a financial cushion. That's a priority. I'm sorry, I'm going out of order. I skipped number 2, the renaming of financial aid refunds. So that's really getting into kind of a behavioral economics intervention there. This last prototype, number 6, improving financial literacy efforts. We want to be very rigorous around this one. We know that financial literacy alone is relatively ineffective. So if there are specific interventions that we can tie to an RCT that can really help us measure behavior change, we'd be interested in pursuing it. But there's some stipulations around moving forward with this particular prototype. Pass it over to Lauren at this point.
Okay, next slide. So we're going to give some examples of prototypes so you can better understand what we're talking about, how we're narrowing into a very specific intervention. So one of the prototypes was modifying distribution of financial aid, and there's actually been some study work already done by MDRC, I believe, or maybe it was MDC, one of those. Anyway, looking at distributing financial aid as a series of payments as opposed to just one lump sum payment at the beginning of the semester or quarter. And the previous study work has shown that there actually is quite a difference in the way students manage their money when they are given a series of payments instead of one lump sum payment. So that type of prototype, which has some logistical challenges associated with it, but this is where the technical assistance would come in to be able to distribute payments over the length of the quarter or the semester, and then to be able to evaluate the impact against some sort of control group. Next slide. Renaming financial aid refunds. Now this may sound strange, but this also is actually a behavioral economics approach that has shown some promise in determining the way students use their money from their financial aid distribution. So many colleges currently use the terminology financial aid refunds. So after tuition and fees are taken from the financial aid, the students are given a distribution which is often termed as a refund. And there has been some initial work and study that shows that the name in and of itself may make a difference in the way students use the money, whether or not they view it as a stipend on which they need to manage through the rest of the quarter or the semester, or whether or not they feel that they have found money and unexpected found money that can be used in any way, which some of the feedback we get from the colleges may mean that it's time to get a new set of tires for the car, which may be a good investment in the long run, but doesn't help the student to have funds at the end of the semester or quarter when they might need it for other living expenses. So doing a study on how students respond to the naming of the financial aid distribution is a very specific intervention that can be done, and we believe that the impact will be it would help students manage their income and spend it more cautiously through the school year. Next slide. Another intervention that could be designed is the automatic allocation to savings, and there are different ways to do this. Looking at possible direct deposit ways of putting some of the financial aid into directly into a savings account, as opposed to the student's checking account or onto a prepaid debit card for financial aid. There could be a couple of parts to this intervention. One would be in the way the students are coached or counseled about their financial aid distribution and anchoring them with the idea that a certain percentage of any income should go into savings. And then the whole idea of using automatic triggers, a way to set and forget moving money into savings so students don't really have to manage that movement. It would happen automatically. And Community Financial Resources actually has a tool that would allow students to receive financial aid through direct deposit, and a percentage automatically would move over to a savings account. So we would look for tools like that and help the schools to figure out how to create the structure to do that automatic deposit to savings to create that safety net financial cushion for students through the school year. And the last prototype, next slide, is around the financial education or financial literacy efforts. As Tanya mentioned, financial education, financial literacy activities in and of themselves, imparting information to students, have very minimal impact upon long-term money management behavior. What we do know is that financial education that is behavior-based, meaning a concept is shared with the students or taught to the students, and then a behavior is required to demonstrate the application of the concept, makes a bigger difference. So, for example, if there is a financial education activity or module or workshop on good banking versus bad banking, using consumer-friendly banking services versus predatory banking services like check cashing or payday lending, the required behavior could be something like opening up a consumer-friendly bank account. Or if there is a specific financial education activity around setting up a budget, the required behavior could be actually tracking real expenses against the budget and working on optimizing expense management. So any financial education initiative as part of phase 2 needs to have this direct behavioral tie, and we would strongly encourage it also be added into in our CT structure to show the difference between having financial education concepts imparted and actually having a long-term effect upon students' financial well-being. And I think at this time I'm handing this over to Wendy.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. So we wanted to talk a little bit about and demystify randomized controlled trials, right? It sounds a little bit scarier than what it is. And before we talk about the specific components, I wanted to take a step back and explain why it's so important. Like why are we repeating this term over and over again? And so for many of you are familiar with the Financial Literacy and Education Commission. It was a commission set up by Congress in 2003 to really roll out nationwide financial literacy and education programs. Earlier this year, they put out a great report. It's called The Opportunities to Improve Financial Capability and Financial Well-Being of Post-Secondary Students, where they did a review of financial literacy programs and tried to put out recommendations. And what they effectively said was that they could only evaluate 3 programs, and that in summary, and I'm just going to quote here, there are few thorough evaluations of post-secondary financial education programs. More rigorous evaluations are necessary to decisively attribute any improvement in student financial behavior to these interventions. Right, so this is a Commission of Financial Literacy and Education in the U.S. coming out and saying, we don't know if these programs really work because so many people haven't tested them yet, right? We're operating under the assumption that whatever we're doing is helping our students, and in many cases that may not be the case. They then go on to say, and I'll start quoting one more time, the universities have a particularly strong opportunity to contribute to the knowledge base of what is effective in promoting financial capability by implementing research and evaluation to test the effectiveness of programs among students. The main way to do this is through a randomized controlled test, end quote. So again, I wanted to just start with that by saying this is something that it's a priority not only for ATD and irrational labs, but nationwide this is a priority because there's such a lack of evidence that any of the great work that you all are doing across the nation is working, right? And so we need to be able to prove that we're actually helping our students instead of harming them in any way, right? And so one of the things that we can think about is what do you think will happen and why? And now I'm going back into the slides. What's your hypothesis here? The first hypothesis is that The first hypothesis is that, you should outline what we think will happen and what will make a change. The second thing that you should have when you make a randomized controlled trial is that you should have at least two conditions. And the difference between these two conditions should be the one thing that you're changing between the two groups, right? Here it says like you change only one big thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one big thing. As Lauren was discussing, changing the name of a refund, right? That could be potentially a very small change. In one condition, you keep on naming it a refund. In another condition, we call it something else, right? And then seeing the impact. Now the third, and I think probably the most critical, is that participants in each condition must be randomly selected. And I think this is where we get most of our questions. And the problem is that if they're not random in some way, you can imagine that any impact that you get from your prototype could be from self-selection bias. All right, so if you set up a financial education workshop and you open it up to your entire student body, and then you measure the impact of what happens to students before and after they attend, and you see great positive impact. Well, it could be that those students that were already motivated to make a change in their financial well-being were the ones that attended. And so the impact, like the reason why you saw that positive impact is not necessarily because of your financial education workshop, but because these people were already motivated to change their behavior externally. Now, one way that you can get around that is to have a sign-up sheet and ask people who are interested who want to attend. Have people sign up, and then you randomly select students from that sign-up sheet. And now you can compare the students who actually attend versus the students that you didn't select, right, and see what happens to their financial outcomes. There, you're completely taking away any self-selection bias from your sample, and you could get the true impact of your intervention, of your prototype. Anytime we talk about random, it doesn't necessarily have to be this complex case. It could be something as just getting a sign-up sheet and selecting X amount from that sign-up sheet. Now, if we go on to the next page, we wanted to give an example of what a randomized controlled trial would look like. So one of our prototypes that we have highlighted is that we want to create an incentive structure so that students put some of their loan money into a savings account when they receive their financial aid distribution. Now, what's our hypothesis here, right? The first step. What our hypothesis here is that a key barrier to savings is that students already allocate that financial aid distribution beforehand without considering savings at all, right? So if we can get students to include an allocation to savings prior to their mental accounting, we believe we can increase the amount that is allocated to savings. And how we're going to test this? Well, we can ask students to fill out a form 4 weeks before receiving the financial aid distribution and figure out and get them to mentally allocate something to savings. Now, if we go to the next slide, what is the control, right? Now, in the control, you can think about if you're asking one population to fill out a form, you should also have the same population fill out another form. For the control, you can have one part form with simple questions about their current savings behavior. Now, in the treatment or your experiment condition, you can have the same form as a control and add a couple of questions on pre-allocation, asking them to identify where they're going to spend or allocate their financial aid distribution, and provide, some sort of questions around recommended savings. Now, if you go on to the next slide, Now you can sort of see what happens to both conditions, right? Does asking people to mentally allocate something work or not? Now we know that this is structuring a randomized control trial is difficult. And this is why we have technical assistants like myself, Lauren, and Tanya to help and work with you on a one-on-one basis and really partner to make sure that we can do this together. So some of the things that we'll promise you and will sort of help you do is to help you narrow in and choose an experimental design that, one, we believe that based on academic research is going to help your students, but also that will allow us to add to the academic research so we can prove or get some sort of evidence that something is working or not. We'll review your testing plans. You know, if you have any questions on, am I choosing a specific, can I choose a specific population? You know, are the new forms required to execute a plan? Any detailed question, we're going to be there to help you. And then on the back end, after we run the experiment, you know, we have the ability to provide technical assistance with the data analytics, right? Analyze what happened so that we can only say, you know, this intervention helped increase financial behaviors by X%. We can also say, and is statistically significant, right? If we run this 100 times, we should expect this to work 100 times, right? Or 95 out of those 100 times. So that's sort of our promise to you, so that you know, we want to make sure that we're viewing this as a partnership. We know that this is something that is needed, is important, and can be a little challenging at times. And so we, including ATD and the entire network, are here to help you and guide you every step of the way. Now with that, I'm going to pass it off to Julian to wrap up and talk about next steps, but we'll be around for any questions after the formal part of our presentation.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Susan and Tanya. I just want to reinforce that last point that that Wendy made about this being kind of a collaboration between ATD and all of our partners on the phone here today and the colleges as a unique opportunity to be of great value to interested WFSNCC colleges that want to take a deeper look at some of the work that aligns with their third pillar. Learning a great deal from what we did, excuse me, in the first phase of work with the 6 colleges that we worked with, and then kind of identifying the best possible way to move forward. And it is through a combination of unique technical assistance provided by CFR and Lauren, by Rational Labs, and by CFSI. So moving forward, similar to what we did in the first phase, it will be a combination of technical assistance provided via phone and perhaps some site visits, as well as modest grant funds through the generous support of MetLife Foundation that also supported phase 1 of this work. So I just wanted to reinforce that as kind of a unique collaboration moving forward. And I will, at the end of this presentation, I'll revisit again the kind of the opportunities to participate. So some of them, not all of them, require RCT. It really is identifying the colleges that have the capacity and interest to do a deeper dive on the evaluation side of their financial products and services work. So just moving forward briefly, the elements of college proposals, and I'll discuss the timeline toward the end when the proposals will be due, but we'll be beginning with the letter of interest. Thinking about for your own institutions, you know, really what are the behavior changes that you're seeking to I guess see as a result of the prototype? How will the prototype I guess instigate behavior change? What will be the result of the behavior changes? So really thinking about what, you know, getting at the core of how you intend to implement this service or product, kind of with the end goal being the ultimate behavior change you want to see in the students. But additionally, thinking about behavior changes in those that can help facilitate its implementation and scaling. That is any faculty and staff and senior leadership. What is needed to kind of make it a successful implementation? And target population of students, all students or a specific subset. So these are just questions to keep in mind that will be included in the template for you to submit for the proposal. So you don't need to memorize this now. but just kind of keeping these questions in mind as you consider submitting a letter of interest to ATD for phase 2 of this work. And then prototype-specific metrics. Beneficial behaviors to be incented and tracked, projected number of impacted students, and how will the impact of the prototype intervention be compared to a control group. So again, all of these things just to think about and begin to frame how you might implement a certain financial product or service to support the third pillar of your broader WFSNCC strategy and put some of this work into greater context. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the other considerations would be, action steps and timing. So we know that ATD, we were throwing a lot at you, and we have a very ambitious timeline for WFSNCC implementation and scaling. So it'd be really important to think about realistically what are the immediate action steps and kind of timing of implementing this component of the work. Also, who will help own and be the internal champion or champions of this work? Who will be the go-to person either on your existing WFSNCC core team or an additional person who you'll bring in to help advise and lead this work internally? Who needs to be involved? Institutional and interdepartmental support requirements. As you think about your WFSNCC student flow charts that you all submitted with your implementation plans a while back, where does this fit into those flow charts? What offices, I guess centers, on-campus centers, or perhaps external partners may need to be engaged to promote this work. Specifically, external partners, if there's a local financial institution with whom you desire to partner with to have IDAs or match savings accounts, where do they fit into the matrix of this work? Technical assistance. What subject matter expertise would help you implement a successful financial prototype? I can tell you that we've got access to a great number of folks, not just on the phone, but beyond, that can add their expertise and insights on supporting implementation of your work. And then thinking about scalability, as always, ATD and all of our partners have promoted WFSNCC being implemented with scale in mind. So just jumping back up to the target students, it would be more advantageous to reach a larger number of students early on to help prove the concept than starting with a very small subset. So just all things to kind of consider as you think about submitting a letter of intent and hopefully ultimately a proposal to ATD to evaluate as we move forward and identify colleges' interests and in implementing this work of phase 2. Before I go into that, well, I'll review the timeline really briefly. So September 18th, letters of intent are due. They are this will not be a heavy lift of a very lengthy writing exercise. It will be a very brief, one page or slightly more letter indicating your interests and potential products or services that your institution is interested in pursuing. So we can provide an example or a brief template. We will send out a template that we used, or instructions that we used in phase 1, that is just a very brief statement indicating that you are interested in some possible financial products and services that you are interested in implementing or expanding as it aligns with the WFSNCC strategy. So again, it's not intended to be a lengthy report, but just a very brief letter of intent expressing your interest in your institution's interest in moving ahead. We will then, shortly after September 18th, we will send out to interested colleges a proposal template that will include certain questions that I just went over to consider as you work through the proposal to indicate the best way forward for your institution to pursue this work and in what areas. We will notify colleges in mid-October, and we will begin the planning with those colleges on October 19th with colleges beginning implementation in January 2016. So we are aiming to have about 8 to 9 colleges participate in phase 2. And if we could just go back to slide 13 very briefly, I want to go over again the different options for for participating. Let's see. So there are the existing prototype colleges that include the 6 colleges that participated in phase 1, and they can resubmit with their plan to ATD, and our partners are very interested in identifying ways for them to scale their existing initiatives, or if there are new products and services they want to implement, they're certainly eligible to submit for those as well. So existing prototype colleges continue with their existing approach. That's one option. Existing colleges commit to RCT evaluation of their current intervention. So again, as I mentioned, RCT likely will be a smaller number of colleges in phase 2. I'd say a very small number who actually participate in RCT, given that it requires some capacity of the colleges to do it. And then kind of the third option, existing or new colleges select phase 2 priority prototypes with potential for RCT evaluation. So they all have potential for RCT evaluation, but again, it will be a conversation that we will have with those interested colleges to determine and talk about the expectations of RCT and be very transparent in that regard. So again, those are the options for participating. They will also include and reiterate in our materials for proposal submission. If we just, I believe we've got one question, or more than one question. Just 1 second, we'll review them and get right back on. So one question is, do existing colleges do an LOI for phase 2? And the answer is yes. We would like just a brief note indicating your interests and the potential direction of your interests. So we want to be able to evaluate all letters of intent together, including from the original 6. And so I want to, I guess, in closing, and then I'll open it up for additional questions. The goal of the financial services and asset building component of WFSNCC are to one, to strengthen financial education outcomes by creating skilled strategies to lead to financial behavior change among students. 2, link students to affordable or no-cost products and services that alleviate the financial challenges that cause students to drop out or stop out. And 3, promote financial behavior change that leads to better financial health among students and graduates over time. We believe that these strategies together will address the financial challenges many community college students face, including weak skills in managing cash flow, lack of a financial cushion, and poor credit. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate, the reason why ATD considers this such a critical part of the WFSNCC strategy. And again, as I mentioned, with growth support from MetLife Foundation, we're very pleased to be able to move forward with phase 2 and identify additional colleges that are interested in getting a combination of both technical assistance from the experts that we have on the phone today, the panelists, as well as some modest grant funding to support implementation. So we sincerely appreciate all of your time today on the webinar. I'll pause to see if there are questions either in the question pane, or I can unmute you and you can ask your question live. Let me just look at the question pane and hop back on in just 1 second. So there's one question with regard to the funding level for the grant, for the additional funding to the colleges, and that is we're still determining the actual amount, but we can tell you that in the first phase, colleges received, each college received, with the exception of one that received a little bit more, about $10,000 of additional funding. But I can tell you that the technical assistance they received far outweighed the modest grant amount that they received to implement and help, I guess, to help implement this work. So we will let you know as soon as possible what the actual grant sizes will be, but they'll likely be in that general range, if not a little bit smaller. It depends on ultimately the number of colleges that we receive applications from. But again, just to reiterate, in thinking about the sustainability of this work, the technical assistance provided will far outweigh in many respects the grant amount through ATD. But good question.
So we have another really great question. It's, are there ways to implement RCT evaluation without restricting students from taking advantage of our services and or products?
Great, that is a great question. I would open that up to the panelists to discuss and provide a response. Should we restate the question again for the panelists? Lucia, would you mind just saying it one more time?
Absolutely. Are there ways to implement RCT evaluation without restricting students from taking advantage of our services and or products?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the ways that, one of the things that I would say is that many times you think about RTC and you think about, I'm restricting a student from getting this awesome service. And at the end of the day, is that we don't know whether or not it's an awesome service. Those students that we quote unquote call being restricted, you may be saving them from, an intervention that potentially could backfire. And the way that we're thinking about these interventions are very short term, right? So you're talking about doing an RTC for a semester at most. This is not something where, you do this experiment for years and then, one population of students get excluded over time. The other thing that you could potentially do, who knows, what if students are eligible to get any types of resources around a college campus, you're only focusing on one intervention. So for example, if you're already providing financial education courses, one of the interventions could be that in one financial education course, you have a bank representative present, because we know from research that is positively correlated with better financial behavior, and in another financial education course you don't, right? So your intervention is just whether or not having a bank representative works, but your control condition is still receiving useful information from the college, right? It's not when we talk about testing, we're testing a very small intervention at a time. And so it's not like one population will receive everything and one population will receive nothing. In fact, we advise against that, because then you're confounding variables, right? If you give one population financial education and automatic savings and one-on-one coaching and something else, then you won't know what worked or not.
And Wendy, also I was just, this is Susan, I was thinking about some of the examples that you gave here, and they're not always even about, a program. So when you talk about changing the name of the financial aid distribution and not using the term refund. So everybody's still getting their refund, it's just that one group of students may hear it and get materials that called it something else. Or you gave the example around the, the form that a student might get. And, one student is getting, a form that asks, one set of basic questions or gives them some basic information. The other group of students is getting a form that also asks them, and what would they do with their savings? So I think it's slightly different than what we sometimes think about with these kind of huge random control trial programs that are really complex. Anyway, I think that might be a difference in the way we're talking about it here, and as you said, kind of in a one semester short-term test versus a 5-year huge random control experiment. Did I characterize that correctly, Wendy?
Yeah, that's perfect, Susan.
Great, thank you, Wendy and Susan. Are there other questions from those on the webinar with regard to anything that's been presented today? Next steps, we just to reiterate in terms of the letters of intent, we do have a, I believe last year it was a very brief template that we can send out with, or at least the instructions on what information we'd request of you to include in your letter of intent. Again, very brief indication of your interest that we can send to everyone to turn back around relatively quickly. And that will be a next step for ATD to get out within the next day. But other questions regarding the webinar at this time, please, if you have questions, this webinar is being recorded, and we will post it on ATD's YouTube channel as well as on our website, where we have all of our other recorded webinars. But I encourage you to think about to what extent this Phase 2 work might apply and align with your existing WFSNCC strategies, and thinking about some of those questions as we discussed during the webinar in terms of the behavior change, staff capacity, internal champions needed to get this work implemented and scaled over time. But I strongly encourage you to follow up with me directly with any questions via phone or email, anytime during the timeline that we've indicated to ask questions as moving forward. But if there's nothing else from the folks on the call or any additional comments from the panelists, unless we may have one. Well, yeah, I think we don't have any other questions at this time. So I sincerely appreciate the time, all of your time in joining us for this webinar. We're very excited about next steps and in partnering and engaging with you on this work moving forward. As you've heard today, we've got a great cast of technical assistance providers, all providing their unique perspective on supporting this work moving forward, and they will also be engaged in Phase 2, and we're excited about that partnership as well. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the ATD staff, as well as all of the colleges for joining us today. And again, look forward to seeing some additional information from us regarding next steps. And please contact me directly if you have any questions by phone or email. I guess that concludes this webinar. Thank you.